everybody, and welcome to an extremely special board gaming video. Today I'm going to be doing a couple of things that are fairly unique to my channel. First and foremost, I am going to be revisiting one of my old videos that I had done a long time ago. Secondly, I'm going to be turning what was a top 5 into a top 10. That's right, we are going all out with this one. Now, the only other time that I have ever revamped a video at all was with my strategy games video, and I made from strategy to strategy games revamped. But now today I am going to be talking again about solo games. That is right, the games that you can play by yourself. This has been a huge video for me. I have gotten a ridiculous amount of feedback for it, and I love you guys for it. It is absolutely incredible. By far, I have gotten the most comments on this older video that I've gotten on any of the other ones. So I'm very excited to be able to sort of upgrade this and really not only drive home the point of you can play board games solo, but also the fact that I posted the thing nearly 3 years ago. 3 years ago. I have been making these videos for so long, it doesn't feel like it's been that long. But just the fact that now my collection is much larger, I have played so many more games. Not only that, but I got ridiculously amazing comments and suggestions from you guys. I am very excited to get started here. But before I do, I have a couple of very important caveats to mention. The first caveat to mention is that sadly, yes, most of these games are going to be cooperative games that have solo play rules. The reason being that primarily cooperative games are the ones that you can play solo fairly easily. That said, one very important thing, just like in my last video, is that I will only be talking about games that have official published rules for playing solo. And for the most part, by and large, I picked games that really well, they both do and don't change the gameplay. So for some games, for example, Arkham Horror, which was on my previous video, there are very few changes that really occur when you're playing with more than one person or just playing by yourself. And on top of that, it's very easy to simply play multiple characters in that particular game, right? So that's one example of something that I don't really want to do. But at the same time, again, cooperative games by and large are the ones that have solo play rules. So this list is a little bit biased towards it. But that said, the other thing that I really tried to avoid, again, I went through all of your guys' comments. You had some absolutely amazing ones. One thing that was very important for me personally was that some games are very difficult to find. And that is something that I really wanted to avoid. So one example is somebody mentioned Victory Point Games. It's a company, and pretty much all they do is make solo play games. Same thing for Friday Games, and a couple of others that were mentioned very specifically were Titanic SOS was one of them, and also Zulus on the Ramparts was another one that I saw. And the thing is, again, I'm sure these are great games, but the problem is not only have I not been able to play any of them, the thing is that even trying to go out and purchase them, a lot of them are out of print, and so I can't get them anyway, even if I really wanted to. So I wanted to keep those types of things on the list. But I did just want to mention those very briefly just to say, yes, I saw them. I know that they're there. Thank you guys again so very much for all of your comments and suggestions on this. But unfortunately, obviously I can't fit everything here. And that said, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be going through my top 10, and there are a bunch of other games that I'm going to be mentioning before I really get into the actual top 10, but as I go through the top ones as well, I'll be mentioning some other ones that, especially from my previous video, either got replaced by new games or ones where I was just like, oh, you know, I had to debate about this because I had this, and this, and this, and that sort of thing. But that said, from my original list, very few games actually survived. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. Thank you so very much again for 3 wonderful years of all of your feedback and comments and suggestions. Not only that, but just your general support for my channel. But with that, we are going to get right on ahead into my number 10. At number 10, I've got one of the relatively few games on here that is a very, very competitive one. And there's a couple of reasons that it's at the bottom 10, or at the very bottom of the list, but it is still a very fun game to play solo, and one of the games that I actually did a review and demonstration on. The game itself is Firefly. Now, I mentioned in my review and demo for this game that it does have a solo mode, and the thing is, I really, really enjoy it. But there's a couple of issues that I have with it which put it at the bottom of the list. But do keep in mind, there are a lot of games you can play solo. This still makes the top 10. The biggest thing for me is the theme. I love Firefly. I really enjoy the show, Serenity, all of that kind of stuff. I am a huge fan of the way that the theme is implemented, the way that you really feel like you are in the Firefly universe. That is a big thing for me personally, and a big part of why it's on this list. But that said, the way this game works is the first thing you do is you pick a specific scenario to play through. And one of those scenarios is the solo play thing. The way it works is you have little tokens that act as game timers. So you go through effectively 20 rounds of the game where you can do several different actions. And at the beginning of the game, you pick a specific goal that you want to do, whether it's, I believe, it's getting being in good with contacts. I don't remember the exact term now. There's that. There's having a bunch of money, and then having, I think it's reputation. I don't remember exactly what it was, but essentially there's 3 goals. You pick one of them to do. Now, the biggest issue with this game is the relative lack of replayability when it comes to the solo mode. Because you've only got 3 goals to pick from, then there's only so many very ideal ways to play. You do have cards that affect you when you're moving and going around and that kind of stuff, and you can pick your initial crew members and things of that nature, but at the same time, meh. I mean, it is a great game. It's a lot of fun, and again, the way that the solo game plays out is actually very, very good. But I would pick, obviously, at least 9 other games over this one. But it is a very good one. If you are a fan of the TV show, I highly recommend it with more than one person. With, I believe it plays up to 5, if I'm not mistaken. Let me take a look. Oh, it's 4. 4 players. It is a tremendously fun game. It is a very well-designed game. I personally love it. As a solo game, it is good, but there are better ones out there. With that, Firefly, my number 10. At number 9, I actually have one of the very few games that survived from my previous video. Now, in this particular case, this is a war game. Now, if you have seen my video, then you probably know that the game itself is Labyrinth. So first and foremost, this game has been knocked down quite a few pegs from where it was before. The thing is that I really, really enjoy this game. I love Labyrinth. I love Twilight Struggle, its sort of counterpart. The idea behind this game is that you're playing through the War on Terror. You have essentially the US versus the terrorists is how the game plays out. When you play this game solo, you essentially have an AI opponent that goes through and it does blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. And okay, fine, it's good, it works. The thing is that playing it several times through, it can get repetitive, kind of the way that Firefly does, because you've got a relatively same type or style of play. You've got the same sort of goals that you have every single time. And the thing is, the AI responds the same way every time, because the AI is literally a sheet that you follow through, and it's sort of like a mind map where you say, has this event occurred? Yes, no. Has this event occurred? Yes, no. And it just leads you to different actions that your opponent takes. That said, it is a tremendously fun game. You do still get a lot of the strategy from playing the 2-person actual combative game, but at the same time, for me, especially on repeated playthroughs, it does leave some to be desired in terms of the replayability, but it is still on this list because I do still very much enjoy it, and it is a lot less complex. I will give away something for a little bit later. Race for the Galaxy was one of the other games that I had on my top 5 list. It is not on my top 10. The reason being that with so many expansions, Race for the Galaxy got ridiculously complicated to play solo. So Labyrinth itself, I like the way it is. I do like the way that Race for the Galaxy did it, but I just feel that Race ended up going really, really far, and it got so complicated and convoluted that it just became difficult to keep adding on more and more content. Whereas with Labyrinth, obviously it has no expansions, but that's not really a problem. It's a good game. Again, if you've played it like 4 or 5 times-ish, then it does start to feel a little bit repetitive, but it is still a great solo experience. Labyrinth, my number 9. At number 8, I have a game that was actually suggested by several people on my previous video. And it was one that, at the time, I really, really wanted to play, and thankfully I finally have. It's a wonderful game. It is Ghost Stories. The way that this game works is that when you are playing in a co-op group, the idea is that you are all playing as these characters who are trying to stop hauntings at a gravesite, essentially, is the idea, and you're fighting ghosts, hence Ghost Stories. The way that the solo play works is that you take one very specific character, one who can essentially fly around to get around easier, and the game itself is relatively, or I would argue, the most similar to the regular co-op version of the game, and that's why it's lower on this list, because you don't really see a whole lot of change in terms of the actual gameplay that you're doing. And that's kind of, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's really not that bad of a thing, because the game itself is very fun. It is a very strategic game. You've got heavy replayability because you're constantly changing which ghost you're dealing with, how you're dealing with them, and not only that, but you have the big bad guy that can change around as well. And so you do have the versatility and the replayability in terms of you can make it more or less difficult, which is something I really love to see, especially in solo games, for the replayability, all that kind of stuff. It is a very, very fun game. It's relatively quick to play, which is another nice thing, especially when it comes to solo games, but it's a lot of fun. Incidentally, the artwork is actually really great. I know it's not something that I mentioned too much, but it's something that I really enjoy and appreciate in this particular game. Ghost Stories, really tremendously fun, great both as a co-op game with multiple people, up to 4 is what this one plays, or playing solo. Ghost Stories is my number 8. At number 7, I have a game that actually really directly replaced one of the other games that I had on my previous list of my top 5. The game that it replaced was actually Thunderstone Advance, and the game that replaced it is Legendary. Now in this case, I had a huge argument with myself, because there are 2 great Legendary games that I really enjoy. There is Legendary, just Legendary, which is the Marvel version, and then there's Legendary Encounters, which is the one where you're fighting off aliens, like literally aliens from the movies. The thing is that I personally prefer the theme of Marvel, right? I prefer the superhero theme. I prefer the gameplay to this slightly, even though they are exceedingly similar. They are very, very similar to one another. I just personally prefer the way that Marvel is done, where you're fighting off the supervillain, and you've got all of the, you've got the different scenarios that you can go against. It feels like you've essentially got more game. You've got more meat in this particular one. Not only that, but you do have a lot of expansions that you can potentially add on to this. Encounters is getting more and more expansions. Relatively recently, the Predator, Encounters Predator was released, so and those you can actually combine, so you have Alien versus Predator and just all sorts of crazy stuff. But the Marvel Legendary, for me personally, is just more fun. I prefer the versatility of it because you've got different heroes that you can get for your deck building. You've got different scenarios where you can play against the different bad guys, all that kind of stuff. Now, as far as Thunderstone Advanced is concerned, or Advance is concerned, the reason that this replaced it for me personally is, again, mostly the versatility, but also the theme. I am a huge fan of fantasy, like D&D and Pathfinder and all those kinds of things. I do really, really love them, but the superhero theme, I really frankly enjoy just a touch more, just enough that it pushes it over the edge. But the biggest thing is the multitude of scenarios. You have much better replayability with Legendary compared to Thunderstone Advance. That said, Thunderstone Advance, you also have great expansions for it. You do have great mechanics. It was a really tough call between the three: Thunderstone Advance, Legendary, and Legendary counters. But for me personally, this one wins out. It's once everything is organized, it's very easy to set up and tear down because you're talking about cards and a board. So all three of them, relatively simple, again, once everything is really put in place well. But either way, Legendary, the Marvel version, is my number 7. At number 6, I have another game that was a little bit of a debate between two. Now, neither one of them was on my original one, but this is a game that I have absolutely fallen in love with and have talked about several different times. The game itself is XCOM, the board game. Now, XCOM is very, very unique in that you actually use an app. You use either a tablet or a phone, whatever it happens to be, so that you can play through this game. And the idea is very similarly with Firefly, where you've got different scenarios. Now, the reason that this is so much higher on my list than everything else I've discussed so far is simply the randomness. Excuse me. The randomness for this is obviously created by the app. And the thing is that it means a lot of the events are completely and utterly unpredictable, and it makes it a lot more fun for me. And again, you have that much more intensive replayability as well. That said, the other thing that really draws me to this game particularly is that I really enjoy the XCOM video games. I enjoy the original XCOM, the what is it, UFO Unknown or whatever it is, that were then smashed together to make XCOM Enemy Unknown, upon which this board game is based. And again, I love the versatility, I love the replayability, the randomness of it. It feels like you are literally playing the board game version of the card game. And the timing element, that little bit of chaos, is also tremendously fun. For me, personally, obviously that is not something that a lot of people really enjoy, but for me, I really like it. Now, the other game that I was seriously debating about this was Space Alert. Space Alert has a very similar mechanic in terms of you have the CD-ROM that is actively playing through the scenario, telling you what's going on, and you have to actively adjust for whatever it is that's happening. You have to move around and change things and do this, that, and the other. Thematically, they're really not that different at all. They're both very sci-fi, obviously. The biggest difference is in Space Alert, you're on a ship, whereas in XCOM, you're fighting off aliens in a base with soldiers. But the ideas are very, very similar, where people are getting attacked and you have to deal with damage that's occurring and all this kind of stuff. I happen to just prefer XCOM because of the nature of the game and because of the options that it gives you as far as what you can do, and not only that, but just simply the technological integration within this game is something that I really enjoy and appreciate. So with that, XCOM is my number 6. At number 5, I've got another game that is very scenario driven, and the thing is that this one is a lot more complicated in terms of the actual game mechanics, which is something that I really appreciate and enjoy, but I enjoy it in this game specifically because the instructions are very, very well thought out and very well explained. The thing is, you probably have to watch a couple of review videos or demonstrations before you really get it, but once you understand it, it becomes tremendously fun. The game itself is Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe, again, it's a scenario-driven game, so you do have the very specific solo scenario. The thing is, I love the way that this game works. You've got a lot of different mechanics that are synergizing exceedingly well to make a very well-balanced game and a very fun experience overall, whether you're playing with a bunch of other people. Again, just like many of these games, this one is up to 4 players. Whether you're playing with a bunch of other people or playing solo, I love the balance within this game. I love the different objectives that you can achieve, the versatility of the game, the replayability of the game. You do have a bit of difficulty shifting and adjustment, not too much, but just enough that it really keeps things interesting and keeps you wanting to come back for more and more. But again, the really nice thing for me on this is the sheer variety of things that you can do within the game. Whereas with some of these other ones, so like Legendary in particular, where, I mean, the idea is that you're deck building. You're building up a deck of cards and you're playing them. You buy, you fight, you buy, you fight, you buy, you fight, etc., etc. And the thing is, the action, mechanically, not that interesting, but with Robinson Crusoe, there is so much going on. There is a lot happening within the game that not only do you have to keep track of, but at the same time, really creates a very unique experience. So, with that, Robinson Crusoe is my number 5. At number 4, I've got a game that I do not believe was suggested on my solo games video, but has been suggested on several of my other videos. And since I got it, I've played it with other people, I've played it solo, and I love it both ways. Now the thing is that this is something that does break the rule in terms of if you play this game solo, it is really identical to playing with other players, except you are acting as those other players. That is really the only thing that's different about it. But it is such a good game that I am putting it on my list. It is Mice and Mystics. Now effectively, this game is really replacing Arkham Horror from my original top 5 list. And the reason being that in Arkham Horror, the idea is that if you're playing solo, the really major difference is that you're playing by yourself, and that's it. The rules themselves really don't change a whole lot if you're playing solo. With Mice and Mystics, they literally do not change at all. The whole point is that if you are playing solo, you are playing as 4 separate characters, and that's it. That's all there is to it. With Arkham Horror, you can very easily do that. That's how I play. I play with multiple characters because it is solely a cooperative game. There is not a shred of competitiveness in there. You don't have like the person who's the king and gets the most points or whatever it happens to be. It is literally everybody is trying to help everybody all the time. Now the reason that not only is this on the list, but it's so high up on the list is because I adore the story. It is a fairly, I mean, for lack of a better term, stereotypical fantasy story where you've got good guys who are trying to save the princess and kill the bad guy. But in this case, the good guys have been changed to mice, as has the girl that you are trying to save. I mean, this is the whole point. But the great thing about this is that you are talking about a full-fledged campaign story. You are talking about a chapter-by-chapter campaign where you are literally going through the castle trying to find out not only what happened to you, well, you know what happened to you, you got turned into a mouse, but figuring out how to stop it, how to stop the bad guy effectively. That's the idea behind it. And the thing is that the story itself is so compelling. I just love it. I absolutely love it. And that's really what led me to breaking the rule as far as playing this game solo is literally playing the game simply without anybody else. Like, you're playing with 4 players, everybody else left, and you keep playing. I mean, I wouldn't do that because we want to do the story. But at the same time, the game is tremendously fun. The artwork is gorgeous. Again, I don't mention it very often, like I mentioned it with Ghost Stories earlier. The thing is, it's not something that I ordinarily pay attention to, but in this case, it's very unique. Simply because you got to think about you're the size of a mouse. So everything that you're looking at like holes in the wall instead of like highways and things of that nature. So it's just really cool. It's a very unique gaming experience. Extremely well balanced, very, very fun, and the replayability is not entirely there. I still really enjoy it because you do have a decent amount of randomness going on as far as different items that you get and of course combat and all this kind of stuff. So you do have a degree of randomness, but just the fact that you have such a compelling idea and story and just very unique gameplay, and I mean simply the actual theme itself is a fairly unique thing. Mice and Mystics is a great game. I absolutely love it, and it is my number 4. At number 3, this is another game that actually survived from my previous top 5 list. But the thing is, I believe this was actually an honorable mention before, if I'm not mistaken. But the thing is, this game has actually been upgraded, and that's part of why I put it so very high on the list. Now, first off, it is one of my favorite games of all time, and on top of that, it is another co-op game. Shocker, right? I know, you guys are completely and utterly shocked. The thing is, the game itself is Pandemic. Now, the thing is, it is not just Pandemic though, because Pandemic, yes, you can play solo because it is a cooperative game. Technically, any cooperative game can be played solo, you just have to play a bunch of characters. But there was an expansion called Pandemic in the Lab. And with the addition of Pandemic in the Lab, it actually added very specific solo rules, how to play by yourself as a single character. And the way it works is you actually get assistance from the CDC in the form of you actually have a CDC card, and it does a couple of specific things that help you out, essentially. Which is, I mean, it's cool. It's a neat thing, and I think that it's fun to have in a game like this. But again, this is what really upgraded the game for me, because what I really wanted to see, what I love to see, is these very specific solo rules that alter the game enough that make it possible for you to play relatively easily. Because playing Pandemic solo, again, just like, I mean, even Mice and Mystics, the game that I just talked about, or for example, I mean, not Firefly, but any cooperative game that you're going to play solo, you're going to essentially be playing as multiple characters. That's what you can do with just the base game, but within the lab, adding in that CDC card makes the solo play actually feel like a separate entity, and I really enjoy it. Again, obviously, the theme for this game is, you know, tops for me. Like, it doesn't get any better than this. I love science, I do science. For crying out loud, the title of the expansion is In the Lab. That is my job. I work in the lab. So it's, I mean, it's really, really fun for me. I think they did a good job with the solo rules though. You know, you can very easily have bad solo rules, but I think that in this particular case, they did a good job with it. The CDC has several different powers that they're allowed to give you, several helpful, like, assistant things that you can get from them. And on top of that, but you can combine it with a lot of the other modules from not only In the Lab, but from the other expansions as well. So it's a lot of fun. Pandemic, my upgraded to number 3. At number 2, I've got another game that was suggested to me on my previous video, my top 5 video, several times by multiple people, and on top of that, I heard about it on a couple of my other videos as well. It's tremendously fun. I got it almost right after I made my solo video, my solo games video. But the game itself is the Pathfinder adventure card game. That's right, it's another co-op game. Shocking, I know, right? Now, the thing is that Pathfinder adventure card game is a relatively unique game because unlike something like Thunderstone or Legendary where you've got deck building, you do have cards going on, with this particular thing you're actually looking at a deck of the adventure, like this is what's going on, and you draw up the cards and you do whatever it's talking about. I really love the way that the solo mechanic works. Again, it is similar in the sense that you're basically playing the game with a reduced number of players, but you do have a couple of unique little tidbits that make the game unique. But on top of that, it's just a tremendously fun game. You've got a huge amount of replayability because you're constantly moving the deck around. You're constantly reshuffling and redoing, so you might know what's coming, but you don't know where it is, you don't know when it's going to happen. And the best part is that with, I mean, in this case I got Rise of the Rune Lords. You've also got something of Skullrose, I want to say. It's another base set. So Rise of the Rune Lords is a base set, and within the base set of Rise of the Rune Lords you get the first adventure deck, and then there are, I believe, 4 others that you get, or that you can get. And just like with say Mice and Mystics, you're talking about essentially different adventures. You're talking about different chapters of a story, an ongoing campaign. The best part about this is that you can sort of save your progress. You can do this in Mice and Mystics as well, where you're sort of building up a character over the course of time, and it's really, really fun. I love it because it makes me feel invested in the game. It makes me feel like I am actually making a difference and I am changing things. And on top of that, but when you're talking about replayability, then playing through multiple times at each of the individual adventures, it means that so many different things can change. It's great. Same thing with Time Stories. This is another great example, because with that, you know, you're going through this narrative storytelling line, and depending on how well you do, you get different things, blah, 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 blah. No spoilers, right? But either way, Pathfinder, the adventure card game, I personally have not played the again, I believe it's Skullrose. I do apologize if I'm wrong on that. But there are other base sets, and unfortunately I haven't played those. But Rise of the Rune Lords, at least, tremendously fun and excellent solo play. Lots of replayability, tons of versatility, as you would expect from essentially what was a D&D ripoff that is now turned into a card game. Lots and lots of fun, and my number 2. And it is finally that time. It is time for the number 1 game that I love to play solo. Now, if you have seen my videos before, if you have seen my solo play video before, then I would be shocked, I tell you, if you didn't realize that it's Mage Knight. I mean, come on, as if this game is gonna go anywhere. This game is tremendous. It is an amazing game, whether you are playing with 1, 2, 3, or 4 people. It doesn't matter. This is a great game that has a little bit of everything for everyone. The way that this game works is very similar to several of the others that I mentioned, where it is scenario driven. You start off with some kind of goal, you start off with some kind of a something that you are doing, and depending on how you want to play, you can do full cooperative, you can do partial cooperative, you can do full competitive, you can do solo play. It doesn't matter. You can pick how you want to play. You can pick your poison, you can do whatever you want. But one of the greatest things about this game is the fact that it melds mechanics so well. You've got deck building, you've got resource management, you've got exploration, you've got a great combat system, a very unique combat system. You've got all sorts of amazing things. It is absolutely incredible. I love the way the solo play works. You actually use a dummy player in this. It's somewhat similar to an AI, but the thing is, with something like Labyrinth, you have an actual AI that you're fighting against, whereas in this case the dummy player really acts more of a timer, sort of like the way that Firefly works, where you just have like tokens that are going back and back and back. The thing with Mage Knight is that you've got day and night, and that's really what the timer is for, is switching between the two, and then after X number of days and nights the game is over. One of the best things about this game, though, is the ability to adjust the difficulty settings. At the end of the solo game, you have to fight a city. And the thing is that you can actively adjust the difficulty of each city. I believe you're fighting 2 is the idea. And when you adjust the difficulty, obviously you can make it a lot harder on yourself or a lot less difficult on yourself. And it's absolutely incredible. It's a relatively small change. It's a relatively small thing, but I mean, you're shuffling up the individual tiles that you're exploring against. You can change the actual difficulty of the cities. You can turn them into a megalopolis, which is a combination, like a melding together of multiple cities. It's just pretty much everything in this game is adjustable to your skill level. It's absolutely incredible. On top of that, we've got expansions too. I unfortunately do not have any of the expansions, tragically. It's almost kind of frustrating because I want to see what some of the expansions are, but you had more characters and all sorts of other stuff like that. Now, that said, since this is my number one, it's obvious what all is on my list. I've gone through the entire thing. There are a lot of games that I was debating for this style of game, which is like a tile exploration. Pretty much any tile exploration game is going to have a solo mode. We've got things like the D&D sets where we've got Castle Ravenloft and Wrath of Ashelon, however you pronounce that dragon's name. And then I myself have the Legend of Drizzt right here. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, there it is, right there. The Legend of Drizzt. We've also got Zombicide. Zombicide I've got right up here. All great games and a ton of fun solo, but the thing is, for me personally, Mage Knight still takes the cake. And it's primarily that ability to change the difficulty, and not only that, but the fact that you are melding together so many different mechanics and doing it so... I mean, seamlessly might not be the correct word, but really it's very close to seamless. Everything interacts with one another very, very well, and it feels like everything is just exceedingly well balanced. It's absolutely incredible. Excuse me. But like I said, the tile exploration games, pretty much any of them are going to have some kind of solo play mode. Another halfway decent one, at least, Level 7 Escape. That's another one that has it, and that one is like kind of story driven, similar to Mice and Mystics, but I don't enjoy it nearly as much. Either way, I mean, obviously there's a ton of other great games out there that this can be, but for me personally, Mage Knight, still, 3 years later, is my number one game to play solo. So that's it for me, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this top 10 video of board games to play solo. Now, obviously, this is a really big thing for me. This is something that I did 3 years ago. This is huge, and I could not think of anything better than what really amounts to the video that has gotten the most attention on my entire channel, right? I really, really wanted to revamp this because I know it's something that a lot of people are dealing with. It's something that a lot of people maybe not are struggling with, but it's something that a lot of people really want to have. You want to have options to play games even if you don't have other people with whom you can play, at least not in the immediate vicinity. But that said, I did want to mention a couple of other games that people not only mentioned, but ones that very nearly made my list, and also some that I sort of like off the list previously. The first game that I wanted to mention is one that was mentioned by several people in the comments of my top 5 video, and that is the Lord of the Rings living card game. Now, a lot of people said this is my favorite game. I absolutely love it. It's perfect solo. It is the greatest solo game ever. For me personally, I am not a big fan of living card games. It's just not my thing. I don't really enjoy them. The ones that I have played, I don't enjoy them. And because of that, I have not played the Lord of the Rings living card game. It's not, again, it's just not a genre that particularly appeals to me. And I don't mean that as like being disrespectful about it. I'm sure that they are tremendously fun, but for me personally, it's just not something I'm tremendously interested in. That said, I would like to play it. I'm sure that I know somebody who owns it, and it would be great if I get a chance to, and if I do, then maybe this is the one that will change my mind on living card games, and maybe even so, I'll be able to play it solo, and that would be great, obviously, right? Something else as well is Defenders of the Realm, which I also have on my shelf. It's another co-op game, very fantasy, dragons, and this and that and the other, and the thing is, I didn't include that because playing it solo is tremendously difficult. It is very, very punishing to the players to play it solo, and it's really unfortunate because it is a good game. It's a fun game to play with others, but when you play it solo, it says, yeah, you can use only one hero, it's fine. But it's really not. It's really difficult to play with a single hero, so it boils down to it's a fantasy game and you are playing as multiple heroes to accomplish the goal. And that's pretty much it. Now, that's not a bad thing. That is not bad by any means, but at the same time, I mean, all these other games have something that really appeals to me on a more basic level that I really particularly enjoy. That said, there are a ton of other games that offer solo rules. There are ones that I kicked off the list. For example, Race for the Galaxy, which I mentioned earlier, is rather convoluted. Arkham Horror has the same problem as Defenders of the Realm, where it just becomes really difficult to play as only a single hero, and you might as well play as multiple heroes. There's nothing wrong with it. But for both of those games, nothing else really particularly appeals to me. I mean, I do like the theme, but not as much as some of the other games that I talked about. But that said, that's just, again, a drop in the bucket, or the ocean of not only board games, but board games that you can play solo. It is really a huge thing, and as always, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think on the revamping? Do you guys like my new games? Do you think that I kicked off appropriate old ones? Do you think I should bring some of them back? Do you like the new ones that I've got? All of this kind of stuff. And most importantly, what do you think of me redoing some of my videos anyway? It's something that I definitely could do. It has been a long time. It's, you know, I was thinking about it, 3 years. That's a long time to be making these videos, and certainly my tastes have changed, obviously, at least mostly. I mean, I still love Mage Knight. How can you not? It's amazing, right? So, please leave any and all thoughts in the comments below. I especially would love to hear your guys' feedback in terms of what games do you enjoy playing now? Again, 3 years later. Do you still like the same games that you liked before? And with that, thank you so very much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed the revamping of my, my top favorite solo board games to play, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much again, everybody, for watching my top 10 favorite board games to play solo. Again, this has been a tremendous journey, and I have loved every single step of the way. I hope that you guys appreciate this revamping of one of my personal favorite videos that I have ever done. With that, please do let me know what your personal favorites are for this category, and not only that, but if you would like to see me revamp some more of my videos, I would love to do that. I really want to go back and adjust some of the older ones, not only because I've got more experience, but just because I like to see the better quality. But with that, thank you very much again for seeing this. As always, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so you can see more of my work, and you can click the big giant subscribe button to see more of me in the future. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.